For 13 years, I had given everything to my wife's father's company. My time, my energy, my ideas, and my loyalty. I had worked through weekends, missed vacations, and sacrificed sleep, all to transform the struggling firm into an empire worth $85 million. It wasn't just a business to me. It was my creation. I had built it from the ground up, turning failed ventures into strategic successes, closing deals that others deemed impossible, and making my father-in-law's name synonymous with power and prestige. Yet, as I sat at the grand dining table that evening, surrounded by family members who had no idea of the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior, I heard the words that changed everything. "Your wife's new husband will take over now." The voice belonged to my wife. Her tone was smooth, practiced, like she had rehearsed saying it. Her father, seated at the head of the table, merely smiled in agreement, as if this was just another business decision, another shift in power that I should accept without question. My grip on the silverware tightened, but I forced my expression to remain neutral. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing my anger, my betrayal. The betrayal of a man who had dedicated his life to a cause, only to be cast aside like an employee whose contract had expired. I glanced around the table. The rest of the family was chatting, eating, oblivious to the significance of what had just been said. Or maybe they knew, but they had chosen to stay silent, unwilling to challenge the patriarch's decision. That was how it had always been. What he said was law. And I had been a fool. A fool to believe that loyalty mattered. A fool to think that years of hard work and sacrifice would make me irreplaceable. A fool to assume that my wife, the woman I had built a life with, saw me as her partner rather than a placeholder. Her new husband. I looked at her then, truly looked at her, and realized something I should have seen long ago. She had never fought for me, never stood up for me, never challenged her father's authority, even when his choices were unfair. She had simply played the role of the obedient daughter, the princess waiting for her father to arrange the best possible deal for her. And now, she had been promised to another man. Not because I had failed her, not because I was lacking, but because I was no longer useful to them. I placed my fork down gently, smoothing my napkin over my lap, maintaining the mask of control that had carried me through countless business meetings. I wouldn't react, not here, not now. They expected anger, they expected resistance, they expected me to protest like a man who didn't see the game they were playing. But I saw it now. The room filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation. And yet, to me, everything had gone silent. I had built them an empire, and they thought they could hand it over to another man while I walked away quietly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dim glow of my study, staring at the documents stacked neatly on my desk. Financial records, contracts, agreements, all the proof of what I had given to this company, to this family. They had underestimated me. They thought I was just the workhorse, the fool who had built their fortune while they held the reins. But they had forgotten something important. The horse they had ridden for 13 years had learned to run without a rider. And if they thought I would simply walk away from everything I had built, they were gravely mistaken. By 3 a.m., I sat alone in my home office, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the determination on my face. Sleep had no place in my mind tonight. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I combed through every document, every contract, every financial statement I had ever signed. The betrayal from earlier that evening still rang in my ears like a haunting echo. "Your wife's new husband will take over now." Those words should have broken me. They should have shattered my resolve. But instead, they had ignited something far more powerful, an unwavering fire to take back what was mine. For 13 years, I had been methodical. While my father-in-law had played the respectable businessman and my wife had lived in luxury, I had been making moves, subtle, quiet, but undeniably strategic. I was not a fool. I had seen the way power shifted in this family, how loyalty was never a guarantee, how the only person I could ever truly trust was myself. And so, I had ensured that my control over the company was not just symbolic. It was legal, ironclad, and absolute. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I pulled up the executive shareholders agreement. The numbers stared back at me, a stark reminder of what I had orchestrated over the years. 62%. That was how much of the company I owned. Not my father-in-law. Not my wife. Not the stranger they had handpicked as my replacement. Me. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. They thought they had boxed me into a corner, but they had no idea that I had already built an escape route. They expected me to disappear quietly. Instead, I was going to remind them exactly who they were dealing with. As the clock struck 8:45 a.m., I walked into the company headquarters, not as a man who had been discarded, but as a man who was about to burn their carefully laid plans to the ground. The lobby was already bustling with employees, executives, and assistants moving between meetings. Some offered me nods of respect, others glanced at me with uncertainty. The whispers had already started. Did he hear the news? Will he step down? What's he going to do? I ignored them. I wasn't here for rumors. I was here for war. Taking the elevator to the top floor, I strode into my office, my presence alone sending a wave of tension through the space. My assistant, Danielle, looked up from her desk, her face betraying none of the chaos that must have been circling through the company grapevine. She had been with me for nearly a decade, loyal, sharp, and always 2 steps ahead. "Schedule a board meeting for noon," I said, setting my briefcase down. She hesitated only for a second before nodding. "Understood. Anything else?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm. "Call the legal team. I want them ready." Her gaze flickered with understanding. The fight had begun. By the time I settled into my chair, I was already anticipating their next move. My father-in-law would waste no time. He would call in his favors, push the executives to accept the transition, frame it as a necessary shift in leadership. He would use my wife's name to solidify his argument. After all, who would question a man passing his business to his daughter and her new husband? The problem was, I wasn't just a name on a piece of paper. I was the name on the contracts that mattered. At exactly 9 a.m., as if on cue, my office door swung open without so much as a knock. My father-in-law entered first, his presence as overbearing as ever, followed by my wife, her posture poised as if this was nothing more than another meeting. And then, he walked in. The so-called new husband. Tall, young, confident, exactly the type of man my father-in-law would consider worthy of taking my place. He exuded arrogance, a smugness that came from believing he had already won. I almost laughed. "I assume you're aware of the transition," my father-in-law said, his voice carrying the weight of expectation. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers together. Transition? Interesting choice of words. The man beside my wife smirked, as if he found this amusing. I ignored him. He was nothing more than a placeholder, a pawn in someone else's game. My focus was on the real threat, the man who had orchestrated this betrayal in the first place. "We need you to oversee the handover," my father-in-law continued. "We expect full cooperation." I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. They really thought they had everything figured out. "You don't have the authority to make that decision," I said, my voice eerily calm. A flicker of irritation passed over his face. My wife's expression barely shifted, but the smug look on her new husband's face faltered. I reached for the remote on my desk and pressed a button. Behind me, the massive screen on the wall lit up, displaying the executive shareholders agreement. Their eyes darted to the document. Confusion set in first, then panic. "This document states that any transfer of power requires approval from the majority shareholder," I said, watching as the reality of the situation dawned on them. And that would be me. Silence. Heavy. Unmistakable. For the first time, my father-in-law's mask of composure cracked. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No," I corrected, my voice cutting through the tension. "What's impossible is thinking I would spend 13 years building something only to let you steal it from me." I turned my gaze to my wife. "Did you really think I wouldn't see this coming?" I asked her, my voice laced with disappointment. She didn't answer. Her hands tightened into fists at her sides. I let the silence stretch between us before shifting my attention to the man standing beside her, the one who had walked in thinking he was about to inherit an empire. "You have 2 choices," I told him. "You can work under me, or you can walk out that door and never step foot in this company again." His face turned red, his jaw clenched. He looked at my wife, then at my father-in-law. He had expected a victory lap, not a public humiliation. He stormed out without a word. My father-in-law hesitated for a fraction of a second before following. My wife lingered for a moment longer. She met my gaze, searching for something. Anger, regret, weakness. She found none. I had spent years building this empire, and if they thought they could take it from me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The air in my office was thick with tension long after my father-in-law and my so-called replacement had stormed out. My wife was still standing there, her hands clenched at her sides, her carefully curated mask of indifference slipping ever so slightly. She wasn't used to losing. Neither was her father. But today, they had lost. I leaned back in my chair, watching her closely. She was waiting for me to break the silence, to give her something. An explanation, an argument, a reaction. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. "You knew," she finally said, her voice quiet but edged with something sharp. "You knew all along." I tilted my head slightly, as if considering her words. What exactly did I know? Her nostrils flared. "Don't play dumb. You knew what my father was planning. You knew he was going to transition the company to—" She stopped herself before saying his name. She didn't have to. I let out a slow breath, tapping my fingers on the desk. "Of course I knew," I said smoothly. "I know how your father operates. He's predictable. He thinks power is something he can shuffle around like a deck of cards. He underestimated me, just like you did." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This doesn't have to be a war, you know?" I laughed, the sound dry and humorless. "It already is, darling." Her gaze flickered to the massive screen behind me, still displaying the shareholder agreement, the document that had just dismantled all of their carefully laid plans. I saw the realization in her eyes, the understanding that the life she had expected, the seamless transition she had envisioned, had just gone up in flames. "So what now?" she asked. "You think you can just keep me out? That my father will accept this?" I stood up, slowly, deliberately, and rounded the desk. She stiffened slightly as I stopped right in front of her. "Let's get something straight," I said, my voice low. "Your father doesn't run this company anymore. I do. If you want to stay in this game, you'll do it on my terms." She scoffed. "You don't control me." I smiled. "No, but I control what matters. And right now, that's the future of this company. If you thought I was going to just step aside and let you and your new husband waltz in, you don't know me as well as you think." Her jaw tightened. She had always been good at masking her emotions, but I knew her too well. She was panicking. "This isn't over," she whispered, her voice carrying more desperation than confidence. "Oh, I know," I said. "It's just beginning." She turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders back. The first battle had been won, but the war was far from over. I had thrown a wrench in their plans, but I knew my father-in-law well enough to understand that he wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. He had spent decades building his reputation, surrounding himself with people who feared him, admired him, obeyed him. I was about to become the one thing he had never accounted for, his equal, or worse for him, his superior. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Danielle, call a board meeting. Noon." "Understood," she replied instantly. I needed to secure my position before my father-in-law tried to rally the board against me. Money and influence could make people disloyal in a heartbeat, and I wasn't naive enough to think I didn't have enemies among the executives. I walked over to the window, looking down at the city below. I had spent over a decade building this empire, and for what? To be discarded? Replaced? Humiliated? No, not a chance. At noon, the boardroom was filled with executives. Some of them looked anxious, others neutral. A few were clearly waiting to see which way the tide would turn before choosing a side. I took my seat at the head of the table. "I know many of you have heard rumors," I began, my voice steady. "So let me clear them up. Yes, my father-in-law intended to replace me. No, that will not be happening." Murmurs rippled through the room. I let them speak amongst themselves for a moment before continuing. "I've built this company into what it is today. Every deal, every expansion, every strategic move, I've been at the center of it. And I won't allow a man who hasn't spent a single day working here to walk in and take what I built. One of the executives, a man I had always respected, cleared his throat. Your father-in-law has significant influence. He could make things difficult. I met his gaze head-on. Perhaps. But let me make one thing clear. If anyone in this room believes that backing him is the right move, speak now. Silence. Heavy, deafening silence. Good. Loyalty matters, I continued, my tone softer but no less firm. And those who stand with me now will be rewarded. Those who don't? Well, you should know me well enough to understand that I don't forget disloyalty. I let my words settle. This was a game of power, and I had just made my position clear. By the time the meeting ended, I had secured the support I needed. My father-in-law could try to fight me, but he was about to learn something important. I wasn't the man he thought he could control. By the time I returned to my office, Danielle was waiting at the door. Your father-in-law called, she said. He wants to meet. I smiled. Of course he did. Tell him I'll see him tomorrow, I said. At my convenience. As she walked away, I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The battle lines had been drawn, and I had no intention of losing. By the time I stepped into my office the next morning, the weight of what had happened over the last 24 hours was still sinking in. My father-in-law had miscalculated, badly. He had spent years believing he could manipulate, control, and discard me like a piece on his chessboard. He hadn't accounted for the fact that I wasn't just another pawn. I was the one who had built the kingdom, and now I was the one who held the power to burn it down. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I knew exactly who it was before I even picked up. Speak. A familiar voice crackled through the line. You think you've won? I smirked, leaning back in my chair. I know I have. A slow, measured exhale came from the other end. You've made a mistake, son. A mistake that's going to cost you everything. That's funny, I said, twirling a pin between my fingers. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the only mistake was thinking you could take what's mine. Silence. I let it stretch between us, savoring the shift in dynamic. For years, my father-in-law had spoken to me with authority, with the certainty that I would always fall in line. Today, for the first time, that authority was gone. We should meet, he finally said, his voice tight. We should, I agreed. But on my terms. My office. 1 hour. I hung up before he could argue. I wasn't going to let him control the setting, the tone, or the circumstances. If he wanted a discussion, it would be on my turf, under my rules. The next 60 minutes passed in strategic preparation. I had Danielle pull up every document, every financial report, and every legal agreement that mattered. I wanted them printed and stacked neatly on my desk, not because I needed to review them, but because I wanted him to see them, to understand that I wasn't just prepared. I was untouchable. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door to my office swung open. My father-in-law walked in, his presence as imposing as ever, dressed in his usual crisp suit. He was followed closely by my wife, ex-wife, really, though she hadn't realized it yet, and trailing behind her, the man they had chosen to replace me. I ignored him entirely. He wasn't important enough to acknowledge. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and gestured to the seats across from me. Sit. They did. Reluctantly. You think you can just lock me out of my own company? My father-in-law's voice was sharp, laced with barely concealed fury. I smiled. I don't think. I know. I tapped the stack of papers on my desk. 62%, remember? That's my share. Which means I make the decisions now. Not you. Not her. I nodded toward my wife, whose expression remained unreadable. And definitely not him. Her so-called new husband shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. This is a family business, my father-in-law pushed. And you're no longer family. I tilted my head. Funny. You had no problem with me being family when I was the one securing multi-million-dollar contracts, expanding the business, and cleaning up your financial messes. His jaw clenched. I continued. You're right about one thing, though. This is a family business. But see, I was smart enough to make sure that blood ties don't equal ownership. I slid a document across the desk. "This is the revised executive structure I filed this morning," I said casually. "Effective immediately, your title as chairman is revoked. Your board privileges are suspended. Your access to financial accounts? Gone. You no longer hold a single voting right in this company." My father-in-law's face turned red. "You can't do that." I raised an eyebrow. "I already did. My wife, ex-wife," leaned forward, her voice softer but no less sharp. "Why are you doing this?" I turned my gaze to her, finally giving her my full attention. "Why?" I repeated. "You really have to ask?" She didn't flinch, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "You stood by while your father plotted to erase me," I said, my voice steady. "You let him decide that I was disposable. You sat there at dinner, smiling, while he handed my legacy to someone else like I was nothing more than an employee who had overstayed his welcome. I didn't. You did." I cut her off. "And now, you get to watch as everything you thought was yours slips through your fingers." Silence. The man beside her, her new husband, was visibly uncomfortable. He had come here expecting a smooth transition, a welcoming handoff. Instead, he was sitting in the room with the man he had tried to replace, realizing just how out of his depth he truly was. I turned back to my father-in-law. "You built this company, but I made it an empire. And now? Now, I own the empire." I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. "I suggest you start making peace with that." For the first time in his life, my father-in-law looked at me not with control, not with arrogance, but with something close to fear. He had underestimated me, and now he was paying the price. He stood abruptly, shoving his chair back. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No, you will." He turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. My wife hesitated. For a brief moment, I saw something in her eyes. Maybe regret, maybe realization, but it didn't matter anymore. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. She turned without another word and followed her father out. I finally turned to the man who had been left behind, the one they had planned to install in my place. He swallowed hard. "Look, man, I cut him off with a single glance. "Get out." He scrambled to his feet and all but ran out of my office. As the door closed behind him, I exhaled slowly, letting the silence settle. The battle wasn't over yet, but today, I had one, and I wasn't done winning. The morning after the confrontation, the weight of my victory still lingered in the air, thick and undeniable. But I knew better than to celebrate too soon. My father-in-law wasn't the type to bow out quietly. No, he would retreat, regroup, and come back swinging. He had spent decades building his power, surrounding himself with men who owed him favors, men who would gladly stab me in the back if it meant securing their own positions. Which was why I had to move first. I arrived at the office earlier than usual, stepping into the sleek glass tower that bore my legacy. The employees who had once greeted me with polite smiles now looked at me with something different: hesitation, uncertainty. The whispers were growing louder. The company had become a battlefield overnight, and everyone was waiting to see which side would come out on top. Danielle was already waiting in my office when I walked in, her hands resting on a thick stack of files. She had worked with me long enough to know that I wouldn't be resting after yesterday's events. "They're rallying," she said without preamble. I didn't need to ask who they were. "How many?" I asked, taking off my jacket and draping it over the chair. 5 board members met with your father-in-law late last night. 3 more were contacted this morning. He's offering them incentives, bonuses, future positions, anything to convince them to vote against you in the next emergency board meeting. I smirked, shaking my head. Predictable. He's desperate, I mused, taking a seat and glancing over the documents she had prepared. Desperate men can be dangerous, she warned. She was right. My father-in-law was many things, but he was never a man who accepted defeat easily. If he couldn't beat me fairly, he'd try to do it by force, by twisting the narrative, by making me look unstable or incapable, which meant I had to make my next move loud enough that no one dared challenge me again. I flipped open one of the files, scanning the contents. It was a detailed audit of the company's financials, one my father-in-law never expected anyone to see. You went digging, I said, lifting an eyebrow at Danielle. You pay me to be thorough, she responded with a shrug. I leaned back, taking my time to absorb the numbers in front of me. Hidden losses, mismanaged funds, embezzlement disguised as business expenses. My father-in-law wasn't just trying to push me out. He was trying to cover his own tracks. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the desk. How much does the board know? Nothing. He's kept it buried well. And if we release this? Danielle hesitated for a fraction of a second. It would destroy him. I nodded, my mind already working through the angles. Schedule a board meeting, I said. For when? Today. Her eyes flickered with understanding. No hesitation. No second-guessing. I'll make the calls. The battle lines had been drawn, and today, I was going to end it. By noon, the boardroom was filled with executives, each of them wearing carefully guarded expressions. They knew something was coming. My father-in-law was already seated at the far end of the table, his posture stiff, his eyes locked onto me the moment I entered. I didn't look away. I took my seat at the head of the table, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. I called this meeting for one reason, I said finally, my voice even, to discuss the future of this company. A few of the board members exchanged glances. My father-in-law leaned forward, his fingers interlaced. The future is already being decided, he said smoothly. The question is whether you'll accept it or fight it. I smiled, tilting my head slightly. Oh, I'm not fighting it. I'm shaping it. I reached into the folder in front of me, pulled out a thick stack of documents, and slid them across the table. These are the company's financial records, I announced, watching as the executives leaned in, specifically records of mismanaged funds, hidden debts, and unauthorized transactions. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs rippled through the room, eyes darting toward my father-in-law. This is nonsense, he snapped. Is it? I challenged, flipping to a specific page and turning the document toward him. Because this right here? This is a record of $14 million funneled into offshore accounts under your name. The room fell silent. One of the board members, a man who had always been one of my father-in-law's closest allies, cleared his throat. Is this true? My father-in-law's expression barely flickered, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. He was cornered, and he knew it. This is a private family matter, he said, his voice quieter now. No, I corrected, my tone sharp. This is a corporate matter. And as the majority shareholder, I have a duty to protect this company from corruption. More murmurs. The tide was shifting. I leaned forward, driving my point home. You wanted to take everything from me. Instead, you just handed me everything I need to take you down. A long pause. Then, finally, my father-in-law exhaled slowly, his gaze meeting mine. For the first time, he looked truly defeated. What do you want? He asked. Your resignation, I said without hesitation. Effective immediately. More silence. Then, to my surprise, he nodded. Fine. A quiet gasp from one of the board members. Even my wife, ex-wife, looked startled. And the shares, I added. Transfer them to me. My father-in-law clenched his jaw. You're pushing it. No, I said simply. I'm ending it. A long pause. Then, finally, he sighed, pushing the documents back toward me. You really are ruthless, he muttered. I smirked. I learned from the best. And just like that, it was over. My father-in-law left the company that day. My wife didn't follow him, not immediately. She lingered, watching me, but I didn't spare her a second glance. I had one, and nothing would ever be the same again. By the next morning, the entire city knew what had happened. The headlines splashed across business news outlets were as brutal as they were satisfying. Corporate power shift, the end of an era at Hastings Enterprises. Chairman resigns amidst financial misconduct allegations. Hastings' empire crumbles, the rise of its true architect. I sat in my office, sipping my morning coffee, reading through each article with a quiet satisfaction. The war was over. The battlefield was mine. My father-in-law had been forced into resignation, stripped of the company he had once commanded. His shares, once a symbol of his iron grip, were now in my name. And the best part? He hadn't even tried to fight back, because he knew he had lost. Danielle entered without knocking, holding a tablet. You made every front page. Some say you're a genius. Others are calling you ruthless. I smirked. Both are true. She set the tablet down and gave me a pointed look. You should know something. Your ex-wife has been calling. Repeatedly. I didn't react. I had been expecting that. Let her call. Danielle hesitated. She also came by the building earlier. Security turned her away. I exhaled slowly. She's not used to being ignored. Clearly, Danielle muttered, before shaking her head. One more thing, you're getting interview requests. Bloomberg, Forbes, even a few international networks. Everyone wants a comment. I chuckled. They want to know how I managed to dismantle a legacy in under a week? Something like that. I leaned back in my chair, considering. The truth was, I had no interest in feeding the media frenzy. Let them speculate. Let them build their narratives about power, betrayal, and corporate warfare. The only thing that mattered was control, and I had secured it. Decline all of them, I said. Danielle raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. She knew me well enough to understand that I didn't do anything for public approval. And my schedule for today? I asked. You have a meeting with the new board at 2 p.m., she said. They're eager to know what direction you want to take the company in now that it's fully yours. I nodded. Good. Make sure all financial reports are on my desk before then. I want to go in with every number at my fingertips. Danielle turned to leave, but paused at the door. And about your ex-wife? I didn't look up from my coffee. She made her choice. She can live with it. Danielle nodded and left. For a moment, I allowed myself to lean back and close my eyes. The past few days had been an all-out war, but I had emerged exactly where I needed to be, at the top. And I wasn't about to let anyone drag me back down. By noon, I received another call from her. I ignored it. By 12:30, a message came through. We need to talk. I smirked at the simplicity of it, as if a few words could undo everything. By 1 o'clock, she sent another. Please. That one made me pause. Not because I felt anything for her. I didn't. That part of me had been erased the moment she sat at that dinner table and let her father dictate my replacement. No, I paused because I recognized desperation when I saw it. And desperate people were unpredictable. By 1:45, I arrived at the boardroom. Executives were already seated, their postures stiff, their eyes watchful. They had spent years under my father-in-law's rule, conditioned to follow his lead. Now, they were looking at me, unsure of what to expect. I let the silence stretch as I took my seat at the head of the table. Let's not waste time, I said, steepling my fingers. I know there are concerns. I know some of you were aligned with my predecessor. But let me make one thing clear. This company doesn't run on loyalty to a name. It runs on results. A few of them shifted in their seats. We're not going to waste time mourning the past, I continued. We're going to move forward. And those who are ready to do that, you'll be rewarded. The tension in the room eased slightly. These were business-minded people. They didn't care about sentiment. They cared about profit. And if I could make them more money than my father-in-law ever did, they would fall in line. I spent the next hour laying out my strategy, expanding global operations, restructuring inefficient departments, securing new international partnerships. By the time the meeting ended, the board was no longer uncertain. They were intrigued, and I had them exactly where I wanted them. That night, as I was leaving the office, I saw her. She was waiting in the lobby, standing near the entrance in a fitted gray dress, looking as polished as ever. I could have walked past her. I could have ignored her completely, but a part of me wanted to hear what she had to say, if only to watch her scramble for an explanation. So I stopped. She looked up, relief flashing across her face. You finally decided to see me. No, I said simply. I just didn't feel like pretending you don't exist. She flinched slightly, but recovered quickly. Can we talk? In private? I studied her for a long moment. Then, without a word, I turned and walked toward the side exit. I knew she would follow. Outside, the night air was crisp, the city lights reflecting in the glass windows of the building I now fully controlled. She wrapped her arms around herself, hesitating. I didn't want this, she finally said. I laughed, shaking my head. You stood by and watched it happen. She stopped herself, frustration flickering in her eyes. I didn't know how to stop it. You didn't try, I said coldly. Silence stretched between us. I made a mistake, she admitted finally. I nodded, shoving my hands in my pockets. Yes, you did. Her lips parted slightly, as if she had been expecting a different response. She exhaled. I just want to know if there's any way to fix this. I looked at her then, really looked at her. She had been the woman I once trusted, once believed in, and now she was just another person who had underestimated me. No, I said, my voice even. You don't get to fix this. You don't get to rewrite the ending. Her eyes flashed with something. Anger, regret, maybe even grief. But none of it mattered. I turned and walked away, because some things weren't meant to be salvaged. And she had made her choice. As I walked away from her, I didn't look back. There was no need. Whatever desperation she was feeling now, whatever regret had crept into her heart, it was too little, too late. She had watched me be discarded like an afterthought, had stood silent as her father tried to erase me from my own empire. And now, she wanted to fix things? There was nothing left to fix. I stepped into my car, exhaling slowly as I gripped the steering wheel. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I already knew who it was before I even glanced at the screen. Another message from her. Please, just one conversation. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I turned off my notifications and pulled out of the parking lot. There was work to be done, a company to run, a future to secure. The past could keep calling, keep begging, but I was done answering. By the time I got home, my body was exhausted, but my mind was sharp. I poured myself a drink, stepping onto the balcony of my penthouse. The city sprawled before me, alive and endless, glittering under the night sky. I had won. Everything they had tried to take from me, I had taken back, and more. The company was mine now, fully mine, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to answer to anyone. No father-in-law dictating my future. No wife standing in the shadows, complicit in my downfall. So why did I feel this quiet, lingering sense of anticipation? Because I knew the game wasn't over yet. People like my father-in-law didn't just walk away. They regrouped. They retaliated. And I was ready for it. The next morning, I was back in my office before the sun had even fully risen. Danielle was already there, as always, her efficiency unmatched. She slid a file onto my desk before I had even taken my seat. You were right, she said simply. I flipped open the file and scanned the contents. A meeting had taken place last night. My father-in-law, a few of his old allies, a handful of investors who had benefited from his reign. They're looking for a way back in, Danielle continued, trying to gather support, frame you as reckless, unstable. I smirked, setting the file down. They're desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things. She wasn't wrong. Do we have leverage on any of the investors? I asked, already knowing the answer. Danielle nodded, flipping to another page in the file. 3 of them have questionable financial histories. Offshore accounts, unreported earnings, some borderline legal dealings. If they push too hard, we can squeeze them. And the rest? 2 of them are just waiting to see who comes out on top. They don't care who runs the company, as long as their money keeps growing. Then we make sure they know where the real power is. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the most influential investor on that list. A man who had built his fortune on the backs of others, who had never truly cared about loyalty, only profit. He answered on the second ring. I was expecting your call. Then you already know why I'm calling, I said smoothly. He chuckled. Your father-in-law has been very persuasive. He thinks you're too aggressive, too impulsive. He's making a case that the company is better off under someone calmer. And what do you think? I asked. A pause. Then, I think I like making money. And right now, you're the one making it. I smiled. Glad we understand each other. He chuckled again. For now. But power shifts quickly in this world. Be careful, son. I always am. I hung up and turned to Danielle. That's one secured. Now let's deal with the others. By noon, I had locked in the majority of the key investors. They were staying with me, at least for now. That left my father-in-law with fewer allies, fewer options, and fewer chances to claw his way back. At exactly 3 p.m., my office phone rang. I picked it up without hesitation. I was wondering when you'd call. You're making a mistake. My father-in-law's voice came through, calm but firm. You keep saying that, but I'm still here. And you? You're not. A pause. Then, this isn't over. I smirked, leaning back in my chair. It is for you. Silence. Enjoy your retirement, I said, then hung up. I exhaled, setting the phone down. Game over. That night, I returned home and found another message waiting. From her. I miss you. I stared at the words for a long moment, then deleted the message without responding. She had chosen her side, and I had one. I stepped out onto my balcony, the city stretching before me. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Untouchable, unstoppable, and finally, free. By the next morning, the dust had settled, but the game wasn't over. Power struggles never truly ended. They just shifted, reshaped themselves into new battles, new challenges. The difference now? I was the one holding the sword. I arrived at the office before sunrise, the city still waking up as I stepped into the towering glass building that bore my legacy. Employees were moving through the halls, whispering, stealing glances my way. They weren't used to this version of me, the man who had once worked silently in the background, now the man in charge. Danielle was waiting in my office, already scanning through her tablet. She barely glanced up as she spoke. Your ex-wife was seen leaving her father's house late last night. Sources say she's distancing herself from him. I smirked. Of course she is. She sees the writing on the wall. Danielle finally looked up, giving me a pointed look. You think she's doing this for you? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. No, she's doing it for herself. Because that's who she was. She had spent years aligning herself with power, making sure she was always on the winning side. Now that her father had been cast out, she was looking for a way to reclaim her position. What do you want to do about it? Danielle asked. I leaned back, considering. Nothing. Let her flail. Let her wonder if I'll let her back in. Let her feel what I felt the moment she betrayed me. Danielle nodded, not arguing. She knew better than anyone. I didn't act out of emotion. I acted out of strategy. What else? I asked, shifting my focus back to business. The remaining board members are aligned with you, at least for now. The investors who were on the fence have backed down. But there's still one problem. I arched an eyebrow. And that is? She slid a document onto my desk. Your father-in-law still has influence. He may not have ownership, but he has connections. If he wants to make things difficult for you, he can. I glanced over the document. It detailed his remaining assets, his political ties, his ability to manipulate certain markets. He's not done fighting, I mused. No, Danielle agreed. He's just waiting for an opening. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the desk. Then I won't give him one. Schedule a meeting with the board, I said. I want everything airtight before he makes his next move. Already on it, she said, stepping out of the office. I turned my chair toward the window, gazing out over the city. This was the part no one ever talked about, what happened after you won. People assumed victory was the end, but it never was. Power had to be maintained, defended, strengthened, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me again. By noon, the boardroom was packed. The atmosphere was different now. No more uncertainty, no more divided loyalties. They all knew where the power lay. We're going to discuss expansion, I said, scanning the room. Hastings Enterprises is no longer just a domestic firm. We're taking it global. A few surprised glances. Some nodded, already considering the implications. We've relied too long on old strategies, I continued. We were reactive. Now, we're going to be proactive. New markets, new investments. We don't sit back and wait for opportunities. We create them. An executive shifted in his seat. That's going to require aggressive funding. I smiled. I'm aware. Danielle slid another document across the table. We've already begun securing private capital. Within the next 3 months, We'll have the liquidity needed to make our first international acquisition. Murmurs of approval. My father-in-law had spent years treating this company like his personal kingdom, using it to consolidate power rather than actually grow it. That was his biggest mistake. He played defense. I wasn't going to. I was going to conquer. That night, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. I answered, bringing the phone to my ear without speaking. A slow exhale on the other end. You've made your point. I smirked. Have I? A pause. Then, you think you've won. You think this is over. It is over, I said, stepping into my car. You just don't want to accept it. You're playing a dangerous game, son. I'm not playing anymore. You are. And you lost. Silence. Retire, I continued. Enjoy what's left of your influence before it disappears completely. Because if you come at me again, I won't just take your company. I'll take your legacy. A long pause. Then, finally, you really are ruthless. You taught me well, I said before hanging up. I set my phone down, exhaling. That was the last time my father-in-law ever tried to challenge me. 3 months later, Hastings Enterprises secured its first international acquisition, expanding into European markets. The numbers skyrocketed. I watched from my office window as the stock price climbed, the city lights reflecting in the glass. I had won. Not just the battle, the war. And no one would ever take this from me again. That night, I got another text. From her. I still love you. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. I don't. And with that, I blocked her number. Because power isn't just about winning. It's about knowing when to walk away. And I was never looking back. The city never truly slept, and neither did power. While the rest of the world moved through their routines, I was already steps ahead, calculating my next move. Power wasn't just about holding on. It was about expanding. And if my father-in-law had spent decades defending his empire, I was going to spend the next decade building mine bigger than he ever imagined. The office was quieter than usual when I arrived the next morning, my footsteps echoing in the executive hallway. Hastings Enterprises had already begun its global expansion, and the first phase of international acquisitions was locked in. But there was still work to do. Danielle was waiting for me, as always, a fresh folder in her hands. Numbers from our latest acquisition, she said, handing it over. I flipped it open, scanning the reports. The company we had just acquired was already proving to be a gold mine. Revenue up 17% in the first quarter, with even higher projections for the next fiscal year. This is good, I said, nodding. It's more than good, she corrected. It's a statement. The market knows you're not just holding ground, you're growing. That was exactly the point. My father-in-law had spent years playing safe, keeping the company in familiar territory. But power wasn't about safety, it was about dominance. Any pushback? I asked. Not from the board, she said. But your ex-wife has been making calls. I didn't react. To who? Some of the investors. A few of the remaining executives who were loyal to her father. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against my desk. She's looking for a way back in, Danielle continued, trying to leverage whatever influence she has left. And how are they responding? So far, they're ignoring her. But if she keeps pushing, someone might listen. That was the problem with people like her. They never accepted when they had lost. She had aligned herself with power her entire life, always making sure she was on the winning side. And now, for the first time, she was powerless. Let her try, I said finally. It won't change anything. Danielle hesitated. She also showed up at the building again this morning. Security turned her away. I chuckled, shaking my head. She's getting desperate, Danielle noted. Let her be, I said simply. Danielle studied me for a moment, then nodded. She didn't need to say it, but I could hear the unspoken words in her silence. This isn't over. And maybe, in her mind, it wasn't. But for me, it had been over the moment she let me be erased. By mid-afternoon, I was on a conference call with a potential partner in Dubai, discussing another major acquisition. We were expanding fast, and the world was paying attention. Your reputation precedes you, the man on the other end of the call said. The way you handled your transition of power was ruthless. I smiled slightly. Business isn't personal. Oh, but it is, he chuckled. Every move you make tells the world who you are. And right now, the world is watching. I knew that. I welcomed it. By the time the call ended, I had secured another partnership, and Hastings Enterprises was another step closer to becoming a global powerhouse. I had built an empire that no one, not my ex-wife, not her father, not their failed schemes, could take from me. And that was only the beginning. That evening, I stepped into my penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. A drink in my hand. My phone vibrated once more. Another message. From her. I should have ignored it, but something in me wanted to see what she had to say. I opened it. I just want to talk. One last time. I exhaled, setting my drink down. I didn't know her anything, but I wanted to see what her last move would be. So, against my better judgment, I sent a single response. Tomorrow, noon, my office. The next day, at exactly noon, she walked into my office. She was still as polished as ever, still carried herself with the same effortless confidence. But there was something different now, a hesitation in her step, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She took a seat across from me, crossing her legs carefully. "You look good," she said after a moment. I didn't respond. I just studied her. She sighed. "I don't know how to start this conversation." "Then don't." Her jaw tightened slightly, but she forced a small smile. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected. "And it was the wrong one," she admitted. I tilted my head slightly. "Didn't seem wrong when you sat across from me at that dinner table, letting your father replace me like an employee past his expiration date?" She flinched at that. "Good. I was stupid," she said, her voice quieter. "I let my father control everything. I let him make the decisions, thinking it was what was best for me. But I see now." She swallowed. "I see that I lost the one thing that actually mattered." I leaned back, watching her. "And what was that?" I asked, my voice unreadable. She hesitated. "You." I laughed. I didn't even mean to. It just came out. "You didn't lose me," I said, shaking my head. "You threw me away. There's a difference." Her eyes flickered with emotion. "Do you really hate me that much?" I exhaled slowly. "No, I don't hate you. I just don't care anymore." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the realization dawn in her eyes. This wasn't a game she could win. Not this time. "You wanted to talk," I said, standing up. "Now we've talked. I have work to do." She rose to her feet, looking like she wanted to say more. But in the end, she didn't. She just nodded once, turned, and walked out of my office. And this time, I knew she wouldn't come back. As the door shut behind her, I exhaled. Not because I felt relief, not because I felt anger, because, for the first time in a long time, I felt absolutely nothing, and that meant I had truly won. The door clicked shut behind her, and for the first time since this war began, I felt nothing. No rage, no regret, no satisfaction, just a cold, quiet finality. It was over. She had walked out of my life the moment she let her father erase me. And today, I had returned the favor. I turned back to my desk, my fingers grazing the sleek surface as I exhaled. There were no more distractions, no more betrayals to uncover, no more battles left to fight. I had one. And yet, the city outside my office window kept moving, untouched by the war I had waged and won. The world didn't stop for victory. Neither could I. My phone buzzed. Danielle's voice came through the speaker. "The reporters are still requesting an interview. They want to know your official statement now that everything is settled." I smirked, shaking my head. "Let them speculate." I didn't owe anyone an explanation. "Understood," she said. A pause. "By the way, your ex-wife just left the building." "I know." She looked different, not as sure of herself. "She'll adjust," I said simply. Danielle didn't press further. She never did. She understood me better than most. "One more thing," she said. "Your father-in-law has officially stepped down from all his remaining positions. He's off every board, out of every financial circle. The investors have cut ties. He's irrelevant now." I nodded. Good. That was the final piece. The last loose thread. He had spent decades ruling from behind a desk, controlling people like pieces on a chessboard. He had built a name, a reputation, a legacy. And now, he was just another forgotten businessman. Poetic. There's one last issue, Danielle said carefully. His lawyers reached out. He's requesting a meeting. I exhaled. Of course he is. He wouldn't go down without trying to salvage something. Some piece of his power, some remnant of his former life. Set it up, I said. My office. Tomorrow. Are you sure? I want to see the look on his face when he realizes there's nothing left for him to take. Danielle didn't argue. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., she confirmed. I hung up, staring out at the city. Tomorrow, I would bury the past for good. The final meeting. At exactly 10 a.m., my office door swung open. My father-in-law walked in, but he wasn't the same man he had been months ago. Gone was the confidence, the arrogance, the quiet certainty that he was always in control. He looked old, small, defeated. He took a seat without waiting for permission, but there was no power in the gesture. I won't waste time, he said, his voice rougher than before. I know what you think of me. I know you believe this is over. I didn't respond. I just watched him. But you don't understand something, he continued, leaning forward slightly. Power never truly disappears. It shifts. Today, you have it. But tomorrow, it could be someone else. I smiled slightly. Is that a warning? It's a lesson, he said. One I had to learn the hard way. One day, someone younger, smarter, and hungrier than you will come for what you built. And if you're not careful, you'll be sitting in this chair, having this conversation. I studied him. He wasn't wrong. Power was never permanent. It had to be defended, strengthened, reinvented. But I wasn't him. I hadn't built my empire on family loyalty or empty favors. I had built it on strategy, control, and absolute leverage. I appreciate the advice, I said smoothly, but I'm not you, and I won't make your mistakes. He exhaled, shaking his head. We'll see. Silence stretched between us. Why are you here? I asked. I want one thing, he said finally. A seat at the table. I laughed, shaking my head. You had a seat. You lost it. I built this company. And I built it into something bigger than you ever could, I countered. This isn't your legacy anymore. It's mine. His jaw tightened. Then at least let me buy back in, he pushed. Name your price. There is no price. A flicker of something crossed his face. Frustration. Maybe even desperation. You're shutting me out completely? You shut yourself out, I said simply. You made a choice. Now, you live with it. His hands curled into fists on the desk, but there was nothing left for him to fight. You'll regret this, he muttered. No, I said. You will. He stood abruptly, shoving his chair back. I hope you enjoy this power while it lasts, he said. Because one day, you'll look around and realize you're alone. I met his gaze without flinching. Alone is better than betrayed, I said. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. And just like that, the war was truly over. The legacy they couldn't steal. That evening, I sat in my office, the city stretching before me. Everything had changed. The company was mine. The empire was secured. And the people who had tried to take it from me were gone. I had built something no one could steal. Not my ex-wife. Not her father. Not anyone. And now? Now, I wasn't just defending my power. I was expanding it. A knock at the door. Danielle stepped in, her expression unreadable. You did it. Of course I did. She nodded, then hesitated. So what now? I smirked, leaning back in my chair.
Now?
I echoed. Now, I make sure no one ever forgets who built this empire. She studied me for a moment, then smiled slightly. I never doubted you. As she left, I turned back to the city. They tried to erase me. They tried to replace me. They failed. Because Hastings Enterprises wasn't just a business anymore. It was my legacy. And I would make sure no one ever took it from me again. My name is Miles Carter, and last month, I earned something I never thought I would. Something that should have mattered. After 15 years at Briarwood Foundry, 12-hour shifts, busted knuckles, double pay on holidays, and not one damn complaint. I was promoted to operations supervisor. Not temporary. Not acting. Real title. Real raise. It came with a gray laminated badge that didn't smell like sweat, a reserved parking spot near the east gate, and an office with walls that didn't rattle when the forge fired up. I should have felt proud. I should have felt seen. I came home late that night, a pizza box in one hand and the letter from corporate still warm from the printer in the other. Delia was curled up on the couch, legs folded beneath her, scrolling through her phone like the rest of the world didn't exist. Her glass of red wine was sweating on a coaster I built for her last Christmas. She didn't look up. I got it, I said, standing there, trying not to grin like a damn schoolboy. They made it official today, operations supervisor. Full benefits. 5-figure bump in pay. She blinked at me. Not even a full blink, just the slow kind, like maybe she didn't hear me or didn't want to. Then she offered a smile so faint it felt like a leftover. That's great, honey. That was it. No, I'm proud of you. No hug. Not even a toast with that wine she kept swirling like it had secrets in it. She just turned her eyes back to her phone, thumbs tapping out something more interesting than the man who'd been breaking his back for years to give her a better life. I stood there for a few more seconds, like maybe if I gave her time to process it, she'd say something else. But the silence stretched, tight and ugly, until the microwave beeped in the kitchen. I took my box of lukewarm pizza and went upstairs. Then came the dinner. Delia had organized it, said it was just a little something with her family to celebrate. I should have known better. Her brother Reese was there, grinning like always, sipping on that top-shelf bourbon he only brought out when he wanted to make sure everyone noticed how expensive it was. Her parents, Darlene and Ken, had driven down from Covington. Even her cousin Jasmine showed up in heels too high for a family table and a dress that looked like it cost more than our water heater. The food was good, I'll give them that. Delia made the baked mac the way I liked it, and her mother brought those damn deviled eggs I could never say no to. But all through dinner, the talk was about Trent. Delia's ex, Trent, just bought a new condo downtown. Her dad said at one point, like he was proud of him. He's in management now too. Corporate level. I chewed my chicken and stayed quiet. We made it to dessert before it happened. Reese stood up, raised his glass, and grinned like a man who'd been waiting all night for his moment. Here's to Miles, he said. Guess Briarwood needed a token idiot to fill the chair. Laughter. Real, full-throated laughter. Delia's laugh was the loudest. I looked at her. She didn't even glance back. I felt something inside me twist, something that had been coiled too tight for too long. I could feel the back of my neck flush, and I focused on the flickering candle in the center of the table just to stop myself from reacting. Just a joke, I told myself. Just Reese being Reese. Then Jasmine giggled and added, still think Delia peaked with Trent, though. And right then, as if God himself was playing a cruel trick, Darlene raised her glass and said, to Trent, the one that got away. Glasses clinked. Smiles. Even a slow clap from Reese. Delia? She didn't flinch. She toasted. Drank. Smiled. I didn't say a word. I pushed my chair back slow and quiet, stood up, and walked out. No slamming. No shouting. Just left. The Kentucky air outside bit at my skin, but I didn't notice. I got into my truck, hands trembling, heart heavy. The street lamps buzzed above me, and I sat there staring through the windshield, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was being sensitive, that maybe they didn't realize how it landed. But deep down, I knew better. Later that night, I got the text. Delia, from upstairs, while I was still in the garage pretending to organize my old tool shelf. Don't be dramatic. It was a joke. That was her response. Not sorry. Not they went too far. Not I should have said something. Just that. A joke. They laughed at me like I was some sad clown in a uniform that didn't fit. Laughed at my hard-earned promotion like it was a participation trophy. And the woman I married, the one I thought would always have my back, laughed right along with them. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I lay on the old couch in the den, staring at the dark ceiling, hearing the echo of their voices in my skull over and over. Guess Briarwood needed a token idiot. To Trent, the one that got away. Don't be dramatic. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being dismissed, disrespected, erased. And in that quiet room, with only the ticking clock and my own breathing for company, I decided something I hadn't dared let myself consider before. Maybe the man they laughed at wasn't the punchline. Maybe he was just done. And maybe next time, I wouldn't just leave the table. I'd flip the whole damn thing. I didn't go to work the next morning. Didn't call in either. I just got in the truck before sunrise, hands shaking as I turned the key, and drove south. No real plan, just out. Out of that house. Out of that silence. Out of that marriage I wasn't sure I was even in anymore. The roads were still wet from last night's rain, mist hanging low over the asphalt like smoke. The headlights cut through it in a weak, almost reluctant beam, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd even packed my wallet. I didn't check. I didn't care. I must have driven for 4 hours before I realized where I was headed. Somerset. My uncle's old cabin sat near the lake, tucked behind a line of crooked trees and blackberry bushes. It had been years since I'd been there, but something about the gravel crunching under the tires and the side of that weather-stained porch made my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. My Uncle Harvey died 8 years ago, left the cabin to the family. My cousin Jaden was supposed to keep it up, and while we hadn't spoken in years, I knew he had too much guilt in his bones to let the place rot. Sure enough, the gutters were clear, the lock still stiff but working. I stepped inside and let the door shut behind me with a hollow thunk. It was dusty, the kind of dust that clings to forgotten places and things. But it wasn't dirty. A few spider webs in the corners, some scuff marks on the floor, but otherwise, the place looked like it had been waiting for someone. Waiting for me. I dropped my duffel bag on the old corduroy couch, kicked off my boots, and stood there in the quiet. No TV, no buzzing phone, no glances across the room that felt like accusations. Just silence. I grabbed a beer from the rusted mini fridge, lukewarm, stale, but I didn't care. Sat on the porch with my legs stretched out and the bottle sweating in my hand. The woods rustled around me, birds calling out like they hadn't seen another human in days. I leaned back in the old chair and stared out at the trees, the lake just beyond them glinting like a sheet of steel in the morning light. And that's when the question hit me. Not suddenly, not loud, but quiet, too quiet. When did I stop being a man? When did I stop being the person who was earned, not pitted? When did I go from the man who fixed everything with his hands to the man people laughed at over dinner like a broken tool in the junk drawer? Delia hadn't called. Not once. Not a single buzz or "Where are you?" or "Come home." The woman I married, who used to kiss my knuckles after long shifts, didn't seem to notice I was gone. Or worse, she noticed and didn't care. That silence, it said more than any argument ever could. It told me exactly where I stood. It told me I was furniture. Background. The guy who paid the bills and took the jokes. I thought about that night again, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the way Delia's smile curled at the edges when her family roasted me alive like it was just sport. And the worst part? I didn't defend myself. I let it happen. I let them carve into me like I didn't bleed. But out here, on this porch with no one watching, I felt something else stir beneath the hurt. A slow, quiet burn. The kind of heat that comes not from anger, but from recognition. Recognition that I had let this happen. I gave them the benefit of the doubt one too many times. Took the hits and told myself I was being patient. Being mature. Being a man. But real men don't sit at tables where they're not respected. Real men don't stay where they're only useful when quiet. The sun slid higher in the sky. I pulled out my phone finally. No missed calls. One text from my supervisor, Angelo. Everything okay? We good for the team meeting Monday? I stared at it for a while. My thumb hovered. Then I typed. Taking a few days. Personal. He responded 2 minutes later. Got it. Take care of yourself. At least someone noticed. I didn't text Delia. Didn't tell her where I was. I wanted to see how long it would take before she cared enough to ask. By nightfall, still nothing. I charged my phone in the kitchen using an old outlet that sparked when I plugged it in, then curled up on the couch under a scratchy wool blanket. I didn't sleep well. The quiet was loud, and every creak in the floorboards felt like a memory I hadn't asked to remember. The next morning, I shaved. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself I still had a face worth seeing. The mirror over the bathroom sink was cracked at the corner, but the man staring back looked clearer than he had in months. There were bags under my eyes, lines on my forehead I hadn't noticed before, but there was also something new. Focus. Maybe even resolve. Around noon, Jaden showed up. I heard the truck first, the sputter of that engine he refused to replace, and then the screen door creaked open. He stepped inside without knocking, holding a six-pack and a bag of chips like it was a damn cookout. You alive? He asked. Barely. He looked at me, nodded once, then set the beer down. Fridge still sucks. We didn't talk about Delia. We didn't talk about anything, really. Just sat on the porch like we used to when we were kids, watching the trees sway and making up names for the birds we couldn't identify. But in that silence, something healed a little. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring or what I was even going to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back to the house that didn't notice I was gone. Not until I remembered who I was. I pulled back into our driveway 4 days later. The tires crunched against gravel like they were protesting my return, and for a moment, I just sat there behind the wheel, staring at the front door. The porch light was still on, burned all night, every night like it always did, whether I was there or not. Nothing had changed. Same wreath Delia hung 2 Christmases ago. Same potted plants she never watered. Same front step with the hairline crack she kept asking me to fix, even though she never said thank you when I did. I stepped inside, bracing for some reaction. Something. Anything. But Delia was in the kitchen, humming. She didn't jump when she heard the door. Didn't ask where I'd been. Just glanced over her shoulder, offered a smile like I'd returned from a quick jog, and turned back to whatever she was stirring. Hey, she said. Want dinner? I made cobbler. Like nothing had happened. Like we didn't just let 4 days pass without a word. Like I hadn't left wondering if we were even still married. I looked at her hands, how casually they moved, lifting the wooden spoon and scraping the bowl's sides. Like a woman at peace. Then I looked at her phone, face up beside the mixing bowl, and my chest pulled tight. Trent's name lit up the screen in a soft gray notification banner. I didn't say anything. Just walked upstairs, took a long shower, and lay on the bed with my eyes on the ceiling fan, letting it spin and spin as if it could pull the tension out of my body and fling it somewhere far away. That night, after she fell asleep with a smirk still clinging to her lips, I reached for her phone. It wasn't locked. It never had been. That used to mean trust. Now it just meant arrogance. I opened the message thread. There it was. Trent's name, bold and familiar. Dozens of messages, every few hours, it seemed. I scrolled. Old photos. Jokes. Flirty texts sent during work hours. One of them read, "Remember this spot?" Attached was a picture of our dog sitting on the bluff at Elkhorn Lake, except Trent was in the background. That was supposed to be our place. I'd taken Delia there the first summer we met. I taught her how to skip stones on that water. Now she was sending that photo to her ex like it was a shared secret. Another picture, Delia in that dark green dress she wore to the family dinner, the night they all laughed at me. She'd taken a mirror selfie. Below it, Trent had typed, "You wore that for me, didn't you?" She responded with a winking emoji and the words, "Maybe, winky face." I felt sick. And then the kicker, "Made your favorite cobbler today. Miss you." She had made cobbler that night. And she offered it to me first, like I was the one she'd made it for. Like I was still the man who mattered in this house. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I closed the thread, placed the phone exactly where I found it, and lay there in the dark with her soft, rhythmic breathing beside me. I didn't touch her. Didn't shift the bed. Just stared at the ceiling, letting my anger rise in slow waves, controlled, measured, patient. Because now I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. Now I was studying a pattern. She'd laughed when Reese called me a token idiot. She'd toasted her ex. She hadn't called me when I disappeared for 4 days. And now she was stirring batter in the kitchen while texting another man about missing him, wearing a smile she didn't give to me anymore. I started noticing the little things. How she always kept her phone face down around me, except tonight. Maybe she got careless. Maybe she thought I wouldn't care anymore. Or worse, maybe she thought I was too stupid to understand what was happening. At breakfast the next morning, she acted like a sitcom wife. Scrambled eggs, toast with strawberry jam, and that same humming, like she'd swallowed a tune she didn't want to share. I thanked her. She smiled like she deserved a prize. She mentioned going to her sister's baby shower next weekend. Said she might stay the night. I nodded, not because I believed her, but because I was listening now. Watching. Because when someone lies to you, you can either react with rage, or you can sharpen the blade. The next 3 days, I played my role perfectly. I came home on time. I asked about her day. I fixed the dishwasher she claimed was leaking and let her pat me on the shoulder like I was a dog who'd fetched a bone. I even kissed her forehead once, and I swear I saw guilt flash in her eyes for a second. But then she turned away and said, "Text Reese for me. Will you? Tell him we'll see him Sunday." I waited until she left the room. I picked up her phone and scrolled through the threads again. There was no recent conversation with Reese. But there were plenty with Trent. One of them said, "Sunday's still good. Can't wait." Same condo. I memorized the address. I knew that street. Near the river. Close to where Reese used to rent before he moved out of state. Trent had a condo there now. Of course he did. That Sunday, she left in a floral sundress, lipstick on and earrings swinging like wind chimes. "Wish me luck," she said at the door. "For Reese's obnoxious stories or the baby shower games?" She laughed. "Both." Then she was gone. I didn't go inside. I grabbed my keys and followed. She took the same route she always did when she claimed she was going to see her brother, north toward the river, past the old tobacco plant, and through the industrial loop that bled into the nicer parts of town. I followed 2 cars behind, giving her enough space to breathe without ever losing sight of her brake lights. My palms sweated on the steering wheel, not from nerves exactly, but from the kind of cold clarity that sets in when you already know the truth and you're just waiting for proof. She turned down Riverview Lane, a street lined with condos pretending to be upscale, neatly manicured hedges, matching mailboxes, that fake suburban polish that never fooled me. She slowed at a rust-colored building with unit numbers printed on a brass plate by the door, Trent's condo. I pulled over half a block back, parked under a lopsided oak tree, and killed the engine. She sat in her car for a second, checked her reflection in the mirror, reapplied lip gloss. Then she got out, smoothed the back of her dress, and walked to the front door like she belonged there. She didn't even look over her shoulder. That's what struck me. No paranoia. No hesitation. Just the boldness of someone convinced she'd never be caught. Or worse, convinced I wouldn't care. I waited. 3 hours. I didn't even turn the radio on. Just sat there with the windows cracked and the sound of the river in the distance. I counted the people who walked by. A woman with a poodle. 2 kids on bikes. An older man with grocery bags. Not once did I see her come out. The sun dropped lower in the sky, the heat giving way to a cool breeze, and still I waited. Eventually, around dusk, the door opened. She stepped out, laughing. Not just a polite laugh, the kind that made her tilt her head and press a hand to her chest. The kind she used to give me. Trent walked her out. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He stood close. Too close. Touched her back. Said something low that made her laugh again. Then she got into her car and drove off like she was coming back from church. I gave it 5 minutes, then drove home. She was already there when I walked in, flipping through a stack of mail like she hadn't just stepped out of someone else's arms. "How was Reese?" I asked, standing in the doorway with my boots still on. She didn't flinch. Same as always, obnoxious. She smirked and tossed a utility bill on the counter. "His new girlfriend's a nightmare." She lied without blinking. I wanted to ask what Trent's new cologne smelled like. I wanted to ask how many times she'd used my savings to pay for hotel rooms or gas money or take out for a man who once left her for a barmaid in Nashville. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I wasn't even angry anymore. Something colder had taken root. That's when it clicked for me. She thought I'd never notice. That I'd keep playing the family clown. The harmless, hard-working husband everyone could poke fun at over drinks while she played victim in private. They saw me as soft. Predictable. Too slow to act. Too polite to challenge anything that made them uncomfortable. But they were wrong. I'd spent most of my life putting others first. Fixing leaky pipes, double-checking door locks, remembering birthdays that no one remembered back. I thought patience was a virtue. I thought loyalty would be rewarded. But all it had done was paint a target on my back and hand them the brush to color me as they pleased. I thought about Reese, about the smirk on his face when he made the toast, the way the others followed suit. I thought about the dinner table and how Delia didn't flinch when they humiliated. The next morning, I changed the locks. I told her the deadbolt had been sticking and replaced it while she was at work. She didn't ask questions. That was her first mistake. She'd gotten so used to my silence. She didn't recognize when it turned into strategy. I created a new folder on my laptop, labeled Receipts. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, messages, bank transfers. If I was going to be the clown in their circus, I might as well gather my popcorn and take notes before I burned the whole tent down. She asked me that night why I seemed distant. "Just tired," I said. "Long week." She nodded, kissed my cheek, said she appreciated how steady I was. I smiled back. The next time she left to see Reese, I let her. This time I didn't follow. I stayed home and logged into our joint account, downloading transaction histories. She was using the credit card we both had access to. Uber rides, boutique wine, air freshener, and room service. The receipts didn't lie. Even when she did, she came back late. Said Reese had made her watch a horror movie that gave her nightmares. I nodded. Sounds like him. She kissed my forehead again and went to shower. I looked at the hallway mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at me. Not because he was broken, but because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't confused. He wasn't wondering. He wasn't waiting for permission to feel betrayed. He knew, and he had a plan. It started with a knock on my office door, 3 slow taps. I looked up from the production log I was reviewing, and there stood Angelo, my supervisor, shoulders stiff, mouth tight. He wasn't the kind of man who made small talk when something was wrong. His background was military, structured, focused, no wasted words. So when he opened the door and said, "Miles, got a minute?" I knew it wasn't about inventory counts or the malfunctioning conveyor belt on line 3. I followed him down the hallway past the HR office and into a side room they usually reserved for team briefings. Except today, there was no whiteboard or safety poster pinned up. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a sealed manila folder waiting like a trap. Angelo gestured for me to sit. He stayed standing, leaning slightly against the wall, arms crossed. "I'll get to it quick," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "Someone filed a complaint." I blinked. What? He reached for the folder, opened it, and slid a few printed pages across the table. "Says you've been erratic, disrespectful, aggressive. There's mention of inappropriate jokes, questionable decisions on write-ups. Says you've been unfit lately." My stomach dropped. Who filed this? He shook his head. Anonymous. But HR had to bring it to me. Said they're looking into it. I scanned the documents. None of it made sense. The incidents were vague. Unprofessional tone, overuse of authority, unsubstantiated disciplinary actions. And then I saw something that made the blood drain from my face. One line referenced a comment I had made 2 weeks ago, at home, in the kitchen, joking with Delia about a coworker who kept falsifying clock-ins. I'd said, half laughing, "At this point I should just write the damn guy up for being born." That exact phrase was in the complaint. I stared at it like it might change. But there it was, word for word. A joke I made in my own home, during dinner, while she laughed and said I was being dramatic. That's when the trap fully closed around me. Only one person could have known that. I looked up at Angelo. "You know me. Do I seem unstable to you?" "No," he said flatly. "That's why I pulled you in before HR did. Something about this feels off." I left the meeting tight-lipped, holding that folder like it was radioactive. My fingers tingled. My brain wouldn't stop spinning. If Delia filed it, then this wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was a strategy. A calculated move to set a legal foundation. Make me look like the problem. Make her exit clean. I got back to my office, shut the door, and sat at my desk without turning on the monitor. I stared at the wood grain, every detail of the past few months flashing through my mind like a film reel. Her silence. Her laughter at that dinner. The texts to Trent. The lies. And now this, HR complaints using language lifted straight from our private conversations. I opened our home computer that night while Delia was out picking up wine. She'd left her email open, didn't even bother logging out. I searched for keywords. Found drafts. Templates. Notes she typed to herself. Make it seem gradual, document Miles's attitude. Another draft read, "If I'm going to file, it needs to seem like I've tried talking to him." There was even a timeline she'd mapped out. Meetings, purchases, dates she'd tell people she felt unsafe. It was all there. Like a war plan. She was building a case. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about love lost. This was a setup. Legal. Financial. Complete. She was laying the groundwork to walk away clean while burying me under a pile of HR allegations and marital complaints. If she could paint me unstable, take a few witness statements from her side of the family, and frame herself as the calm, rational partner, she could leave with the money. Maybe even the house. She knew me well enough to predict my moves. She counted on my silence. On my tendency to avoid confrontation. On the fact that I worked long hours and barely had time to breathe, let alone notice a carefully orchestrated character assassination unfolding around me. But she underestimated one thing. I pay attention. When the stakes are high enough, I stop blinking. I stop reacting. I listen. I calculate. And when I decide to respond, I don't raise my voice. I raise the ground they think they're standing on. I started collecting. Screenshots of messages. Withdrawals from our joint account. Copies of her notes. I backed up my work communications, including the positive performance reviews Angelo had given me. I installed a home surveillance system. Not because I thought she'd do anything reckless, but because I needed records. Proof. She came home late again that week, tipsy, cheeks flushed from wine or attention or both. I sat at the kitchen table reading a work document when she dropped her purse on the counter and said, "Still sulking?" I looked up, just tired. She smiled without softness. "Maybe you need time off." I stared at her a moment longer than I should have. "Maybe I do." She went upstairs humming. I went back to my folder. It was a Wednesday night when I noticed the first withdrawal. Nothing dramatic, just $120 at a boutique I'd never heard of, listed under LC Home and Gifts. I stared at the bank statement on my phone while the TV played some documentary I wasn't watching. Delia was upstairs in the shower. I scrolled down. Another one, $1.85. Then $212. More small charges scattered over the past few weeks. One or two wouldn't have raised a flag. But the longer I scrolled, the more they started to add up. I logged into the joint account from my laptop, sorted the activity by date, then by vendor, then by amount. When the math hit the four-figure mark, I pushed back from the table and stared at the screen like it might confess something. $9,780.22 had disappeared over the last 6 weeks, spread across wine purchases, boutique stores, digital payments, and one large transfer labeled only as personal reimbursement. I leaned back in my chair, my chest tight, the kind of tight that doesn't come from panic, but from realization. I had built this account. Every overtime shift, every bonus I didn't spend. Every Christmas I skipped the new jacket to make sure her gift stayed wrapped in silver foil. That money was the last thing I thought we had in common, something untouched, something we could still say we shared. Until now. When she came downstairs, towel around her hair and lotion on her legs, I asked, calmly, quietly, "Delia, have you made any big purchases lately?" She barely paused. "What?" "Just noticed some money moving out of the account. Boutique stores, cash transfers." She waved her hand like she was swatting at a fly. "Oh, that. Yeah, just paying down some debt. You know that old credit card from college?" I finally decided to clear it. I nodded slowly. "Almost 10 grand? Her tone sharpened. "Jesus, are you monitoring every dollar now? You've never cared before." "I didn't have to," I said. She scoffed. "God, you're acting like a jealous lunatic. Do you want receipts? You want to see every tampon and toaster I've ever bought?" I kept my voice level. "No. Just the debt." She grabbed her wine glass and stalked out of the room. "You've changed, Miles. And not in a good way." The front door slammed a minute later. No purse, no shoes. Just gone. Like she needed air, because being asked for basic transparency was now offensive. But I didn't follow. I didn't call. I just sat there and reopened the account history. I printed everything. Every line. Every receipt. I highlighted the biggest charges and stuck them in the folder I'd labeled for later. The lies weren't even the worst part. It was the confidence behind them, the assumption that I'd never ask, never look, never notice. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed while she tossed and turned beside me, muttering something about the AC being too cold. At 3:17 a.m., she finally stilled. I got up, walked down to the garage, and opened the locked drawer where I kept the backup phone we used during our road trips. No one else had the number. I charged it, installed a secure app, and began copying documents over. Quietly, methodically. The next day at work, I barely said 2 words to anyone. Not because I was angry, but because my mind had crossed into another place. A place where everything was measured. Where emotion had no room anymore. I was calculating now. I wasn't trying to fix the marriage. I wasn't even trying to understand it. I was gathering what I needed for the end. I checked her credit history when I got home. It wasn't hard. I'd done our taxes for 8 years. Knew her passwords, her logins, her last 4 digits. There was no credit card from college. No debt. Her credit was clean, pristine, practically glowing. The only recent activity was a soft pull for a condo lease, in both her name and someone else's. I stared at the screen until my hands went numb. The second name? Trent Morrison. They'd applied for a lease together. Last month. The same month she'd laughed when Reese called me a joke. The same month she'd stopped calling me babe and started using silence like a scalpel. I sat there in my office, the lights off, and stared at the glow of the screen. My ears rang. I felt like I'd swallowed gravel. I clicked open my screenshot app and saved everything. The lease inquiry, the timestamp, the broker's information. I opened her text messages that night after she fell asleep, curled up like a child in the bed we'd bought on a 36-month financing plan. There it was. Her last message to Trent. We're good to move in next month. He hasn't even noticed. Not if. Not maybe. Not let's wait and see. She was gone. In every way but physical. The body beside me wasn't mine. The smile she wore at dinner was meant for someone else. She had moved on with another man using my name, my money, and my trust like stolen tools to build a new home. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a life. And they thought I hadn't noticed. But I had. And I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I was going to make sure she never forgot how it ended. The first thing the mechanic said when I walked back into the garage was, "You're not gonna like this, man." It was a simple oil change, nothing major. I brought in the truck on a Saturday because I figured the distraction would keep my head straight. The cabin still smelled like her, Delia's citrusy perfume lingering in the fabric no matter how many times I left the windows down. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. I just needed an hour of waiting room radio, stale coffee, and the kind of peace that came from men with grease under their nails talking about cars, not betrayal. "What's up?" I asked, leaning against the service counter. The guy scratched the back of his neck and nodded toward the bay. "Passenger seat. Found a bag. Figured I'd let you check it before we touched anything." I frowned. "A bag?" "Yeah, like a little makeup pouch. Kinda wedged under the seat." "Thought it might be yours." I followed him back, heart already picking up speed. My truck was mine. My one place. My shell. The only thing no one else really touched. Except her, apparently. He opened the passenger door and reached down. His hand came up with a small navy blue bag with a gold zipper, sleek, clean, not dusty like it had been there for long. He handed it to me, then backed off like he already knew he didn't want to know what was inside. I opened it. First thing I saw was a hotel keycard. Plastic. No branding. Just a tiny barcode and room number written in marker, 327. Next, a crumpled receipt from La Jolla and 2 entrees, 2 drinks, 1 dessert. Paid in cash. Then came the note. Folded twice, tucked into the side pocket. Tonight was magic. Let's never stop. T. That letter T hit me like a nail through the chest. I didn't need to ask. I didn't need handwriting analysis. My blood didn't need more proof. T was Trent. And this wasn't just emotional anymore. This was physical. Tangible. Real. She'd been in my truck. With his bag. Driving to that hotel. Lying about baby showers and brotherly visits while carrying around tokens of their nights together like souvenirs. I closed the pouch slowly, fingers steady. My insides were screaming, but my face didn't flinch. I nodded to the mechanic, thanked him, and walked back to the counter like it was just another Saturday. But everything had changed. When I got home, Delia was in the kitchen again, barefoot, wearing that same old hoodie she always pulled on after one of her girl nights. Her hair was down, lips glossed, and she smelled like a perfume I hadn't bought her in over 2 years, Joe Malone's Orange Blossom, a scent she claimed gave her headaches. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. She was dancing slightly, humming to herself as she stirred a pot. Like life was beautiful. Like her lies hadn't unraveled and spilled into the cracks of my truck. She turned and smiled when she saw me. "Hey, babe, want to taste this? Where you coming from?" I asked. She blinked, then shrugged. "Reese's." He wanted help picking a birthday gift for Mom. She lied so easily it chilled me. I nodded and stepped forward, kissed her forehead. "Smells good," I said. She laughed. "Wait till you taste it." I used real garlic this time. I let her serve me. Let her talk. Let her think nothing had changed. And while she chattered about her brother's lack of style and her mother's obsession with planters, I nodded and listened. But behind my smile, I was cataloging everything. The inflections. The tells. The language she used when she was weaving new fiction. She never once mentioned the hotel. Never once admitted she'd been anywhere near La Jolla. She didn't know I had the bag. She didn't know I'd already scanned the receipt, photographed the keycard, and emailed the images to myself in case she lost them later. After dinner, she got a phone call. Trent, I assumed. She took it upstairs, said it was Lena from work. I gave her 15 minutes. Then I followed, slow and quiet, stopping at the bottom of the stairs to listen. She was whispering. No, he didn't notice. I swear. I left it in the back. Yeah, probably rolled under. I'll check tomorrow. She paused, then laughed. I know. I miss you too. I walked back to the living room, sat on the couch, and stared at the family photo on the wall. Us at Myrtle Beach 2 years ago. Me in cargo shorts, her in that red bikini wrap, both smiling like we hadn't seen the cliff ahead. She came down 20 minutes later, plopped beside me, and sighed like it had been a long day. Lena's losing it, she said, eyes on the TV. Her boss is nuts. I wrapped an arm around her, let her rest her head on my chest. Sounds rough? I murmured. She nodded. Thanks for understanding. I kissed the top of her head. Always. But I wasn't understanding anything anymore. I was documenting. I was preparing. That night, while she slept with one hand sprawled across my side of the bed, I went to the garage again, pulled out the flash drive, labeled the next folder, passenger seat, uploaded the photo of the note, the receipts, the keycard image. Then I opened a new Word doc and began writing down everything, times, dates, dialogue. I even included her quote from the phone call. He didn't notice. I swear. She was right. Until now, I hadn't noticed. But now, I saw everything. And soon, so would she. Rochelle Granger's name had come up 3 times in the last 2 years. Once from a guy at work who said she handled his nasty divorce and left his ex with nothing but a futon and a microwave. Once in a local article titled, 10 attorneys you'd want on your side, not against you. And once, oddly enough, in a joke Delia made after a girl's brunch. If I ever needed to clean house, she'd said, sipping her mimosa, I'd call Rochelle. Everyone laughed. Except me. I'd remembered the name. Her office sat above a wine shop on Frankfurt Avenue, quaint, old brick with a wrought iron staircase and a green door that didn't advertise anything but a small plaque that read Granger Law. No receptionist. No logo. Just an old bell that chimed when I pushed the door open. Inside, it was colder than expected. Clean lines, gray walls, a single orchid on the windowsill. Rochelle herself was in the corner office, gray blazer, sharp jawline, glasses perched low on her nose, reading a document with the kind of focus that made you forget to breathe. She looked up when I knocked, like she already knew I'd come. Miles Carter, she said, standing. Her handshake was firm. You've got the eyes of a man who's done waiting. I didn't argue. Just sat down and opened the folder I'd brought. No small talk. No pleasantries. I pulled out the printouts, screenshots of Delia's texts, the photo of the bag, the receipts, the timeline. I slid everything across the desk, one piece at a time, laying out the narrative like an autopsy. I need to end this, I said. But I want it clean. And I wanted to cost them. She didn't blink. Just started reading. 10 minutes passed without a word. She examined everything like it was a case file, like the ink itself could testify. Then she looked up. You want to make this quiet or devastating? Both, I said. In that order. She nodded slowly. Infidelity, financial misconduct, possible cohabitation during the marriage, and digital documentation tying it together. That gives us leverage, significant leverage. And if you want to file on the grounds of marital fraud and depletion of shared assets, we can do that too. I also want a restraining order, I added. Not for her. For him. He's been harassing me through her indirectly. Showing up in my space. Riding in my truck. She scribbled something in her notes. Then we'll cite emotional distress and third-party interference. But we need to move quickly. Once she realizes what you've seen, she'll lawyer up. She won't see it coming, I said. Rochelle smiled. Then let's keep it that way. By the end of the hour, we had everything set in motion. Divorce papers filed under fault-based grounds. Financial forensics to trace the withdrawals. A motion to freeze our joint accounts until the settlement. A formal rebuttal to the HR complaint, drafted and ready to send to Angelo with evidence proving Delia's involvement. And the restraining order request, signed and sealed. I signed the paperwork with a pen that felt too light for what it meant. My hand didn't shake. Not once. When I walked out of that office, the sun was glaring off the windshield of my truck like a spotlight. I climbed in, started the engine, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. The plan was in motion now. No more guessing. No more waiting for her to slip. I had the truth, the timeline, and the receipts. Delia still thought I was the man who had been before I broke. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been. That night, I got home before her. I sat at the kitchen island sipping coffee, the documents still fresh in my mind. When she walked in smiling, cheeks flushed, I didn't look up right away. I just listened to her toss her keys in the bowl, kick off her shoes, and call out, "You're home early." Felt like cooking, I said. She wandered in, eyebrows raised. You? Cooking? Is it the apocalypse? I smiled. Something like that. She leaned over the pot, inhaling the steam. Smells good. Is that rosemary? I nodded, stirring slowly. You should sit. We've got things to go over. Her smile wavered, just slightly. What things? Budget stuff, I said casually. Taxes. Maybe a few receipts. She hesitated, then sat across from me, fingers drumming the counter. Okay. I placed a red flash drive on the table. She looked at it, then back at me. What's that? Everything, I said. Every lie. Every charge. Every message. It's backed up already, so you don't need to worry about deleting it. Her face paled. Miles, what is this? I met with Rochelle Granger today, I said, still stirring the pot. Divorce has been filed. Accounts frozen. HR complaint rebutted. Your boyfriend? He's flagged for interference. By the end of the week, the restraining order will be in his mailbox. Delia blinked, like the words hit her a few beats too late. You're not serious. Oh, I'm very serious. She reached for the flash drive. I slid it back. That's for the judge, I said. But I wanted you to see it first. She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. This is insane. You're making a mistake. I turned off the stove. No, I made a mistake staying quiet for this long. She stared at me, breathing shallow, hands twitching like she didn't know where to place them. You're blowing up our life over, what, jealousy? No, I said. Over betrayal. Over manipulation. Over the fact that you used my truck, my money, and my silence to build a future with someone else. A man you swore was just a chapter you closed. Turns out, you were writing a sequel. Her voice dropped. I didn't think you'd ever fight back. I know, I said, stepping past her. That's what makes this so satisfying. I left her in the kitchen, her breath shallow, eyes glassy, staring at the life unraveling in her hands. She didn't chase me, didn't scream, just stood there like a statue in a burning room. The next morning, Rochelle sent the documents to her office, her email, and her parents. I changed the garage code, had her access removed from all joint accounts. My paycheck was rerouted. Every inch of my life secured, backed up, restructured. Delia was in shock. And Trent? Well, his name would show up in court before he ever set foot near my home again. The game had shifted, and I no longer played the fool. She didn't say a word the moment she stepped into the kitchen and saw it, the plain white envelope sitting right there on the marble counter next to the coffee maker. No name, no stamp, just one, sharp corner slightly curled as if it had been waiting all day to deliver the blow. I didn't greet her. I stayed leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, my eyes calm in a way that made her uneasy. She took one look at the envelope, then looked at me. Her hand hovered over it for a moment before she picked it up, lips pressing into a flat line. What is this? She asked, her voice too smooth, trying to sound unbothered. I didn't answer. She opened the flap and pulled out the papers inside. The divorce petition, the asset freeze confirmation, the notarized notice of our joint account audit, and a printed screenshot of her text message to Trent. Her expression cracked, just slightly, a twitch near the corner of her mouth. You went through my phone? I shrugged. You left it unlocked. I went through my life. She flipped through the papers in a panic, eyes darting over the legal language, the clipped, efficient language Rochelle had masterfully assembled. Financial misconduct, marital fraud, intentional deception, infidelity. Jesus, Miles. This is a little dramatic, don't you think? There it was again, dramatic. The same word she'd used when her brother humiliated me at that dinner. When I confronted her about the withdrawals. When I questioned the missing money, the overnight trips, the lies. But this time, the word didn't land like it used to. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a flash drive. I walked over to her, slowly, deliberately, and laid it gently on the counter next to the folder. She stared at it like it might explode. That's the copy, I said. Screenshots, photos, statements. Everything you've done. Everything you said I wouldn't notice. She opened her mouth, closed it again. I watched her chest rise and fall, her composure thinning by the second. I was going to tell you, she said, but the sentence had no conviction. I nodded. But you didn't. She finally looked up at me. Really looked. You were so detached. You stopped showing up. You worked late. You didn't talk to me anymore. And you texted Trent while I grilled dinner on the porch. You met him in hotels while I paid our bills. You laughed with him the same night you toasted my failure. Her lips trembled. Not from sadness. From realization. She had misjudged the moment. Misread the man she thought she could keep in place. This doesn't have to be ugly, she said. Oh, but it already is, I replied. She took a shaky breath and dropped into the kitchen chair, the envelope still in her hands. You blindsided me. I tilted my head. You applied for a lease with another man. You used our savings to pay for hotel rooms and wine nights while I was scraping grease off my palms and working late to build a life I thought we were still sharing. It wasn't supposed to go that far, she whispered. But it did. Her silence folded around the room like a blanket full of pins. She looked smaller now, shoulders hunched, voice softer, like she was trying to shrink her way out of it. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I had already won the only fight that mattered, the one for clarity. She tried again. You're throwing everything away. All these years. I shook my head. You threw it away. I just finally caught it midair. She stood, suddenly full of breath, pacing the tile like a tiger testing its cage. You don't understand how lonely I've been. You don't get what it's like being ignored in your own home. Don't. I cut in, my voice quiet but sharp. Don't spin this. You weren't lonely. You were bored. And you looked for a better deal. Except now, the man you dismissed is the man who's setting the terms. She went cold at that. I saw her face twist between shame and fury. You're not going to get away with this, she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. With what? Holding you accountable? Showing a judge the paper trail you left wide open? I'll fight this, she said. You think Rochelle scares me? I smiled then. Just a little. No, I think the truth does. She stormed off, disappearing into the hallway. I heard drawers slam, then the creak of the closet door. The wheels of her old carry-on thudded against the hardwood floor like punctuation. She came back through the kitchen with a hoodie draped over her arm, a phone charger in her hand, and the expression of someone who just realized she lost control of the narrative. She paused at the door. Where am I supposed to go? You'll think of something, I said. You always do. She hesitated, then opened the door. As she stepped out, I added, your parents will see that flash drive tonight. So will HR. So will the judge. Her hand froze on the doorknob. Then she was gone. Just like that. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in what felt like years, the house felt still. No tension pressing against the walls. No background noise of secrets whispered behind bathroom doors. Just silence. Real silence. I walked back into the kitchen and poured myself a drink. Nothing special. Just the cheap whiskey I used to keep in the cabinet for cold nights and worse news. I sipped it slow and looked at the empty chair where she'd sat just minutes ago. The envelope still sat on the counter, but the weight of it was gone. It had done its job. That night, her brother Reese sent me a text. Didn't know it had gone that far. I stared at it. 3 seconds. 5. Then I locked my phone and set it face down. No reply, because some things don't deserve one. Let them sit with their silence, just like I had to. Delia's lease with Trent? Voided within the week. Turns out when you submit a full legal complaint detailing financial fraud and misrepresentation during the lease application, brokers listen, especially when you attach the paper trail, the screenshots, the withdrawals, the can't wait to move in together text. The leasing office called me directly, not because they had to, but because, in their words, we've never seen a situation so cleanly documented. They canceled the lease. The deposit, almost $4,000 from our drained joint account, was forfeit. I didn't smile when I read the confirmation email. I didn't pump my fist. I just folded the printout neatly and placed it in the final folder of my case. One more brick in the wall she thought she'd scale. Her parents tried calling twice the next day. First Arlene, then Ken. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left to explain. They were at the dinner. They heard the toast. They watched me sit there in silence while they toasted Trent, their daughter's ex-boyfriend, the so-called one that got away. They saw their son-in-law, the man who paid for her dental plan, who fixed their sink on a Sunday, publicly humiliated. And they said nothing. Laughed, even. They chose their silence. Now they could live in it. But I wasn't done. I opened my email, attached the family photo someone took during that dinner, Reese's hand raised in a cheer, Delia mid-laugh, her dress the same one she later sent a mirror selfie of to Trent with the caption, "Did I wear this for you?" Maybe, winky face. I paired that photo with 3 other attachments. 1. Her text, "Miss you. Made your favorite cobbler tonight." 2. The screenshot from her application, co-lease with Trent Morrison, move-in date pending. 3. And the dinner receipt from La Jolla Inn, signed in her handwriting. Then I typed one line. "You toasted the wrong man." Send it to Delia's family group chat. Send it to HR. Send it to her boss. She didn't respond, but Reese did. This is low, Miles. I left that one on read. 2 days later, HR formally dropped the complaint against me. I was called into Angelo's office again. Same folder on the table, but this time, he looked different. Not stiff. Not nervous. Just quiet. Measured. Why didn't you tell me it came from your wife? I leaned back in the chair. Would it have mattered? He paused. Not to me. But it would have changed how they handled it. He pushed the folder aside. We've cleared your record. Formal apology from corporates in the works. You're solid, Miles. You've got more grit than most men I know. That landed differently. Not because I needed the praise, but because it came from someone who'd seen me beyond the jokes. Beyond the dinner table mockery. Angelo had watched me come in early, leave late, cover for sick coworkers, and handle equipment breakdowns on weekends. He saw the man, not the puppet everyone else tried to make of me. I stood, shook his hand. Appreciate that. He smiled, then added, There's a promotion coming up. Regional Ops Lead. You should apply. Thought I'd already been made the joke of the last one, I said dryly. He didn't laugh. Then it's time they stopped laughing. I applied the next morning. Got the call 3 weeks later. Promoted. Again. No dinner this time. No family toast. Just a quiet morning, a new badge, and a corner office that smelled faintly of oil and coffee. I hung up my coat, sat at my new desk, and looked out the window at the plant floor. Not because I missed it, but because that's where I came from. Every bruise, every callus, every stupid joke, they all built the man sitting in that chair. Delia? She moved back into her childhood bedroom. The same one with the posters still tacked to the wall and the shelf full of old trophies she never earned but always bragged about. Trent didn't stick around. That's what her cousin Jasmine said, anyway. He bailed after the lease fell through. Claimed he wasn't ready for the drama. That word again. Drama. They called it drama. I called it documentation. Delia texted once. Just one line. I didn't think you'd ever fight back. I stared at it for a long while. Thought about replying. Thought about typing out all the things I wanted to say during those months she dismissed me. During the dinner where she laughed at me. During the night she came home smelling like another man's cologne. But I didn't send anything. I just blocked her number. Because the joke ended the moment I stopped laughing. 2 months later, I pulled up to the Briarwood parking lot in a car I never thought I'd own, black Ford Explorer, paid in full. Leather seats, backup cam, something reliable, something mine. As I stepped out, someone from the plant floor waved. New guy Dante. Young, eager, probably still had grease under his nails. Hey, Mr. Carter. Call me Miles, I said. He jogged over. Heard you're the reason Reese Hawthorne won't show his face at company events anymore. I smiled. Is that so? He laughed. Word travels. I patted his shoulder. Don't believe everything you hear. But yeah, maybe believe that one. I climbed the stairs to my new office. The hallway smelled like fresh paint. The nameplate on the door gleamed in the light. Miles Carter, Regional Operations Lead. I opened the door, walked in, and took a deep breath. This was mine. All of it. Not because it was handed to me, but because I earned it. Through silence. Through grit. Through knowing when to let people talk, and when to let them watch you rise. That afternoon, Rochelle called. Just got the final confirmation, she said. Divorce is finalized. Settlement's locked. She walked away with exactly what you wanted her to. Nothing. Less than nothing, she said. Her name's removed from the house. Car. Accounts. The court ruled in your favor on every point. Judge even made a comment about your comprehensive preparation. You might have missed your calling. I chuckled. Nah, this one was personal. Well, Rochelle said, her voice laced with satisfaction, you took your pain and turned it into precision. I don't see that often. Thanks, Rochelle. She paused. You ever need anything else, you call me. Hell, I'd hire you. I hung up and stared out my window. Across the parking lot, I saw Delia, standing next to her dad's car, arms folded. I scanning the building like she wasn't sure if she wanted to come in or keep walking. She didn't see me, but I saw her. She looked different now. Not the woman who glided through rooms with smug confidence. Not the woman who made jokes with her family at my expense. She looked like someone waiting for permission that wasn't coming. I watched her stand there for 2 more minutes. Then she turned and got into the car. Drove away. She never came back. That evening, I stopped at the liquor store by the old railroad tracks. Picked out a bottle I'd only ever seen other people afford. A celebration, not for the divorce, but for surviving it with my dignity intact. When I got home, I opened the bottle and poured 2 fingers worth into a glass. I sat on the back porch, the one I'd rebuilt after the summer storm 2 years ago. The one Delia said was a waste of a weekend. It didn't feel wasted now. The sky was that soft orange pink you only see in Kentucky before a storm or a turning point. I leaned back, glass in hand, and breathed in the quiet. My quiet. No text buzz. No games. No lies. Just me. A man they laughed at. A man they underestimated. A man who doesn't beg anymore. I didn't toast the moment. Didn't need to. Because the real toast was in the silence. The joke was over. And I was no one's punchline anymore.